Hi guys, I want you to do these problems with me on the whiteboards. You can stop the video anytime you want. Let's get started. So what we've been doing is factoring and then solving, and once we have the solutions, we sketch the graph. Take a look at the first one. Remember always to look at the type of polynomial that it is. X to the fourth minus 5x squared plus 4 is a trinomial. So with a trinomial, we could do diamond method. You're looking for factors of 4 that add up to negative 5. So what times what is 4 and adds up to negative 5? Negative 4 and negative 1. Now, this is a quartic, so when you break it into your two factors, remember to put x squared minus 4, x squared minus 1. You can then factor those two again because they're both subtracting, and you can take the square root of 4, and you could take the square root of 1. I'm going to pause for a second, see if you can figure it out. Second. Okay, so it should look like a W. It's going to go through negative 2, through negative 1, down through 1 and 2. And that's how it should look like. All right, take a look at number 2. Okay, I started a new page on number 2. So how many terms does this polynomial have? If you see, it's 4 terms, and the only method you could do here is factor by grouping. So we're going to group the first 2 and group the last 2. Then you're going to take you're going to find the GCF in each group. So the GCF in the first group is x squared. Okay, go ahead and see if you can figure out what's left over. Okay, good. We have x plus 5. What's the GCF in the second group? Basically, what can you divide each of these by? 4. Good. So I'm going to factor out a 4, but be careful, it's a positive 4. Now, when you figure out what's left over by dividing by 4, I have x plus 5, and these two should match, and they do. X plus 5, x plus 5. Okay, so the x plus 5 becomes one factor, and the outside x squared plus 4 becomes the other factor. Now, be careful, because the x squared plus 4 cannot factor again. Remember, it has to be subtracting, and this is adding. So I'm going to have to solve x squared plus 4 equal to 0 a different way. Now, x plus 5, when you solve it, that's just going to be negative 5. X plus 4, I'm going to have to subtract both sides. And then what do I do with the square? What do you guys think we do? We're going to square root it. When you take the square root, Remember to always put plus and minus. Always. Every time you take the square root, you put plus or minus. Now here's the tricky thing. Can you take the square root of a negative? No. So it comes out as an I. But the square root of 4 is what? 2. So it's going to be 2i. So what happens is I end up with two imaginary solutions. I end up with positive 2i and negative 2i. I cannot graph imaginary solutions, but I can graph the negative 5. So when I graph it, I can only plot negative 5, which is over here. So I want you to think about for a minute, how is this graph going to look like? We talked about this yesterday, that when you get two imaginary solutions, so my answers are these: negative 5, 2i, and negative 2i. Okay, I have three answers because this is a cubic. So when you have two imaginary solutions, you cannot graph that on the x-axis. It's a cubic, and it can only cross through negative 5. We talked about this yesterday, so look back at your notes, talk with each other, see if you can figure out how that graph would look like. Okay, so it's a cubic. You could either draw the hump at the bottom and go there. Sorry, a little off, like that. Or you can draw the hump at the top. But no matter what, it can only cross at negative 5. Again, you can stop this video anytime you want and rewind it. Let's go to the next problem. Okay, number 3. This is a trinomial, but notice that I can take out one x from everyone because the first one is a cubic. Usually if it's a trinomial, this exponent has to be an even number. And notice that the last one has an x and the middle one has a 2 x's. So I can pull out one x. When I do that, each of these go down one x. So I get x squared minus 4x plus 4. Now, the first x, you're always going to bring that down. Okay, just bring it down. The trinomial, I could do diamond method. Factors of the last one, positive 4, that add up to negative 4. What times what is positive 4 and adds to get negative 4? Think about it for a second. Negative 2 and negative 2. So when I put them into my factors, I get x minus 2, x minus 2. Remember, you are solving. When you set each of these factors equal to 0, x equals to 0, that's pretty much done for you. And x minus 2 equals to 0, for both of them, you're going to get positive 2. So what happens is you end up with two 2's. What happens on the graph when you have a double 0, when your answer repeats twice? Do you remember? Go ahead and pause this and see if you can figure it out. Okay, I hope you guys talk to each other. But if you look back at your notes, sorry, this is so crooked. Okay, if you look back at your notes from Wednesday, we talked about multiplicity, which is when one of your answer repeats. Remember that your graph can only cross at 0 and at 2. That's it. Those are the only answers. Well, this is a cubic. When my answer repeats, what's going to happen is your graph, it goes through 0 because you only have one of those. It's going to come down, touch. Whoops, sorry, that's too sharp. Let me erase that. Okay, it's going to come down, it's going to touch the 2 and bounce off of it. That's the only two places your graph can cross, nowhere else. And again, it bounces off the 2 because the 2 repeats. Okay? Don't make the graph too sharp. That's why earlier I erased it, because it needs to curve. All right. Let's go to another one. Again, remember you can pause this. Okay, number 4. This is a trinomial. It's x to the 4th. So that's an even exponent. You can do diamond method here. There's no x's that you can pull out because the 28 doesn't have an x. So I can do diamond method. Factors of 28 that add up to 3 is going to be 7 and negative 4. Because it's x to the 4th, remember to split x to the 4th evenly, and you get x squared, x squared. X squared minus 4 can be split again to x plus 2, x minus 2. But x squared plus 7, that one cannot be split. It cannot be factored anymore. So we'll have to solve this a different way. X plus 2 and x minus 2, when you solve, you'll get negative 2 and positive 2. So those are pretty much done. But x squared plus 7, you will have to subtract 7 to both sides and get x squared equals negative 7. And then how do I get rid of the square? You take the square root. Don't forget to put plus or minus always when you take the square root. Now that negative inside the square root, it comes out as an I. Okay, be careful with that. It just comes out as an I. The 7 stays inside the square root because square root of 7 is some decimal. You don't have to figure it out. You could just leave it as square root of 7. You don't have to find the decimal because you can't graph the imaginary anyway. So you could just leave it as plus or minus I square root of 7. Okay, to graph this, it's a quartic. How does the graph look like? A W, right. So remember, I can only graph the negative 2 and the positive 2. You cannot graph the imaginary solutions. So I'm going to plot negative 2 and positive 2. And your W is going to come down through negative 2, curve, and it's going to go below it, and then curve through 2. Okay? All right, guys, work on the quizzes and the worksheet that I left, and I will see you Monday.